Hello everyone and welcome to the Global Mapper webinar for the month of October. My name is Heather Poirier and I am Marketing Manager for Blue Marble Geographics. Today I have with me David McKittrick, Senior Applications Specialist.
Thanks Heather, and thank you everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Before we get started, I'd like to mention a few housekeeping notes. Everyone is in listen-only mode. If you would like to ask any questions, you can use the GoToWebinar panel to the right of your screen. We also have some Blue Marble product specialists with us that will answer your questions as they're submitted, and we'll save some time at the end for any outstanding questions.
That's right, and also folks, don't forget that at any time you can submit whatever questions you need to our helpline, which is geohelp@bluemarblegeo.com. I will share that email address at the end of today's presentation. I'll bring up a slide. I also want to put in my plug for the Global Mapper Forum. It's an excellent resource for finding information about the product and for interacting with other users and getting some very pertinent information. So again, I will bring those some information up about those two options at the end of today's presentation.
So David, we're here today to talk about what's new in Global Mapper 15, is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, we are. We're going to be exploring some of the new tools in there. We're going to be looking at some of the new features and functions. There's going to be some very exciting new capabilities that we're going to be introducing you to. Before I get into the actual guts of the presentation, I believe you have some upcoming events that you want to remind all the folks about, Heather?
Yeah, we have several events coming up in the next couple of months, but there's two that I'd like to highlight. We have a Global Mapper training opportunity on December 2nd and 3rd in Ottawa. And we also have a very exciting Blue Marble user conference next week on Wednesday in Houston, Texas. We're going to, if you're in the area, we invite you to come join us. There's going to be some great presentations, and Mike Childs will also be there with us. He's the lead developer of Global Mapper.
Wow, Mike's going to be there now. If that's not reason enough to go to the user conference, I don't know what is. So Heather, folks who want to go to the user conference, do they have to pre-register, or can they just show up? What's the deal with that?
We prefer you to pre-register so we can get an accurate head count. You can do that online. You can go to our website, and you can also go to the About section of our website, see a whole list of our events, and there's a link there as well for our user conference.
Great, and I'll share that information at the end as well. Again, so if you can hang around to the end of the presentation, there's a lot of useful contact information and useful websites that we'll share with you. Thank you, Heather. So let's get on with the presentation itself. Let's take a look at what we're going to be covering today by way of an agenda. We are introducing Global Mapper 15. It's a brand new product for us. It's been out for a few weeks. We've got a lot of very positive feedback from those early adopters out there. And we're going to take a look at what I would consider to be the highlights, the key functions that have been introduced in the software. We have a brand new LiDAR module. Those of you who work with LiDAR files, .las, .laz files, we have a lot of new LiDAR functionality. We're going to introduce that today. We have introduced a raster calculator. This has actually been in the development process for quite some time, finally fine-tuned and introduced into Global Mapper version 15. So we'll show you an example of using the raster calculator for performing mathematical operations on multi-band imagery. We've significantly changed the way we deploy our software. We've introduced a process whereby you can enhance the functionality through modules and through extensions, and we're going to show you how that works and what effect that will have on you, the Global Mapper user. We'll introduce that in just one second. Very exciting new format has been introduced, support for both importing and exporting 3D PDF files. We've been talking a lot in recent webinars about the geospatial PDFs. Well, this adds a new dimension to the PDF generation capability, allowing you to export and import 3D PDF files, and we'll take a look at some of those again a little bit later. There have been a number of digitizer enhancements. I will show you a few in my presentation. We've expanded our scripting options, And one of the key new developments is the integration of the geographic calculator's data source capability within the context of global energy mapper specifically. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this in this webinar. There's a lot involved. Instead, we're going to defer this to next month. For those of you who are interested in finding out how this is going to work for you, I encourage you to look for the announcement about next month's webinar. And it's actually going to be a twofold webinar. We're going to talk first about how this is set up in Geographic Calculator and how it reflects into Global Mapper. Essentially what we're doing here is we're integrating some of the functionality from Blue Marble's Geographic Calculator application into the Global Energy Mapper. And we'll show you a little bit of that today, but again, waiting till next month, you're going to get much more detail. Now, I've condensed the what's new into what 7 or 8 bullets here. If you're interested in finding out all of the functional enhancements that have been applied for version 15, go ahead and download. I'll give you the link at the end of the presentation. During the download and installation process, you will get a window that shows you what's been added. There's also it's actually an RTF, a document that's installed in the program files where you install Global Mapper, and you can open that and scroll through the list. This time around, we introduced a list of functionality that is 9 pages long. So obviously, I can't go into all of the details, but if you want to see everything that's added, I encourage you to refer to that document, and you'll get the full list of functionality that's been added. Let's take a look at the application itself. Obviously, the structure of the application has not changed. You will notice a few new buttons in the toolbar. Those of you who are using an older version of Global Mapper will notice that we have added a few buttons. I'm going to cover what they are in just a few minutes. The first major functional enhancement that I introduced during my introduction is the way that the application is deployed. Those of you who are fans of Global Mapper, have been using it for some time, will be aware of the fact that we have 2 parallel products. We essentially have a standard Global Mapper product, and we also have a product called Global Energy Mapper. Up until version 15, those were considered separate applications. You could opt to purchase one or other. With Global Mapper 15, we've integrated the 2 into one application, essentially. You can download a single file. Now, whether or not you choose to install or license Global Energy Mapper is controlled within that one application. And it's done within a module manager. Within the Help menu, you'll notice a Module Extension License Manager option. And if you have chosen to license Global Energy Mapper, you will have the opportunity to activate your license right within this dialog box. You will also notice I have a module that enables me to apply some advanced LiDAR processing capabilities. I'm going to cover those in just a few minutes. So this is a module approach to how we deploy more advanced functionality. And as we continue with the development of Global Mapper, we will be able to deploy more advanced functions using this tool. It will allow us to send a single installation and to enable functionality based on the license that you have available, based on the license that you have purchased. Also in this window, you'll notice we have introduced an extension manager as well. This gives developers, third-party developers, the opportunity to deploy, to build and deploy their own extensions, to add functionality to the application to enhance the functionality. And you'll notice in this window we've actually included a couple of extensions to get you up and running. The overview extension I will show you in just a second. The Coast extension is a very specific component of the software that has been designed to do a cost analysis of flood or sea level rise simulations. It's a pretty advanced tool, and there's some excellent documentation that's been written on this, and if you want to explore it further, it is something that you can use. It is available within the framework of Global Mapper 15, so you have the opportunity to enable this extension and to use the functionality. Again, in the interest of time today, we don't have a chance to go through the entire process, but there is some excellent written resources that you can refer to. So the overview extension is one that I have enabled. And let me very quickly show you what that does. It's a very simple little tool that allows you to essentially show an overview of a map. Now I'm zooming into part of the coastal area of Central Africa here, and if I click this little button, I'll just isolate the button so we can see it individually. If I click this button, this provides me with an overview of the extent of the data that I have loaded. Now in my case I have a world map loaded, so I can see exactly where I am in the world. And obviously this will apply for any loaded data. The extent of whatever layers you have loaded will be visible right within this window. You can also use this to navigate. So if you quickly want to jump to a different part of the world, simply by clicking in the overview, you can jump to that part of the world. So it's a very simple tool for visualizing your location and for simplifying the navigation within your loaded data. It's a toggle button. In my toolbar, I simply toggle it on and toggle it off as needed. And with all the other toolbars, we can move that to a more convenient location as needed. That is activated right from within the help menu from our module extension license manager. The other modules you will have noticed in there are the LiDAR module and the GEM module. There is a third one called OTF, which is Objective Terrain Format. This enables the support for a particular data type that's used a lot for three-dimensional terrain simulation applications for military use. That's what that third one is. And again, in order to activate that, you will need to have the proper registration information. You'll need to have the proper license. Once you have activated a module or a collection of modules, the application will represent that information right in the toolbar. So I have Global Mapper 15 installed, but I also have activated the LiDAR module and the Global Energy Mapper module. So if you were a previous customer, a previous user of Global Energy Mapper, you'll see Global Mapper plus GEM. Functionally, you'll have the same tools as you had previously. It's just a more efficient way of deploying those tools. As we continue to develop Global Mapper, as I said, we will enhance the availability of these models. We will add additional modules, modules to expand that functionality. So I mentioned there's a number of new formats. One specifically I referenced in my introduction was 3D PDF data. Let me go ahead and load up a sample file, and we'll walk through the process of generating a 3D PDF, and I'll show you the end result. I'll load that file into Adobe Acrobat Reader. Now what you're seeing on the screen right now is some LiDAR data. This is a LiDAR point cloud. We will be coming back throughout the course of today's presentation and revisiting this area because we're going to be illustrating a lot of the new 3D functionality that's available and a lot of new LiDAR functionality that's available. But for now, let's explore specifically the 3D PDF generation. Now, if we go to the File menu and we go to Export, where previously we had the standard export PDF file, which is a geospatial PDF, now we have the ability to export a 3D PDF. Because this layer is inherently a 3D layer, you can see my exaggerated terrain here. I need to bring down my exaggeration slightly, but you can see these this point cloud can be rendered in 3D within the context of Global Mapper. We're going to export that, and it will be available as a 3D file within a PDF reader. So let's go ahead and move through the process here. I'm going to limit the export just for this particular purpose to the data that's on my screen. We'll leave the default settings as they are. I'll simply click OK, and I'll call this test. And actually, I have a PDF file that I had generated previously, so we'll take a look at what that looks like in just one second. So while that's going through the process of generating, and it's simply an export or a file save process, I'll bring up Adobe Acrobat, and you'll see basically the same file that I just generated preloaded into Acrobat. And this is the standard version of Adobe Acrobat. This is the reader. This is the free version of the application. But now it's been configured to allow me to view my data in a 3D environment. I'm just clicking and holding with my left mouse button, and I'm scrolling around within this, this view. And as you can see, it allows me to view the data in 3D. So that's just one example of how that would be, how you can use that. You can also import a 3D PDF. It's a standard format for import purposes as well. So a brand new function in version 15 is the support for 3D PDFs. So in my module manager, I showed you the LiDAR module that had been activated. You'll notice a new toolbar right along the bottom of my screen. This is the brand new LiDAR toolbar. We've got a couple of other components I'm going to show you that are related to that as well. This is advanced functionality for working with LiDAR data. We have a series of classification buttons. You'll notice these abbreviated with the appropriate classify information. A little pop-up tells you what they do. So for a selected point, or if it's a group of points or a query group of points, we can reclassify them as ground points, vegetation points, different heights of vegetation, buildings, power lines. These are the common LiDAR types, LiDAR point types, and we can automatically reassign our point data just simply by clicking on these buttons after some point data has been selected. So it's a very, very useful tool. I'm going to switch perspective for just a second to show you this next tool. Let me unload this file, and I'm going to shift to a different location, a different LiDAR file. This is a LiDAR point cloud right close to where we are here, just up the road in our state capital in Augusta. And you'll see this has got some buildings, got some trees. Unfortunately, when this data was collected, it was not classified very well. We have basically a lot of wrongly classified data. And if I turn on my classification visualization, you'll see is I've basically got two types of data. My brown points are ground points, but all this gray stuff is simply unclassified. Well, I know there's a lot more information in here. In fact, I know within this kind of darker band, there are points which are ground points. They're not being classified as ground points, but we know they're ground points. This is a band of overlapping LiDAR points. They're classified as unclassified because of the way the data was configured, or the collection process was configured. We now have a new tool that will allow us to essentially automatically classify points. I'm just grabbing a small section here, and I'm going to automatically classify those as ground points. Let's go ahead and we'll specify the bounds, actually. That's probably the easiest way to do this. I'm going to choose a section over here that I didn't select, and we'll click OK. And we will run through that process and click OK. And what you're going to find is after it completes, all of those points that would be ground points are automatically assigned to that classification. And it does that based on a mathematical process where it sees within a specified threshold which points are likely to be ground points. So I can use this to really clean up my data, to really make it much more meaningful in its classification. You'll see it has omitted to classify a lot of these points, which would probably be vegetation or tree cover in this case. And it will automatically assign those that are unclassified to a ground point. So that's a new tool allowing you to automatically classify ground points. Let's go back to where we were a few minutes ago. We're going to be jumping around just a little bit and looking at a lot of different data sets, a lot of different point cloud data sets. We're going back to our original set. By the way, the file that's loading up is an interesting LiDAR data set that's representing some dunes. I've used this quite a lot in some of my training classes and presentations. This is used to measure the encroachment of dunes on a residential area. We'll see that in just a second when we turn on some imagery. Point filtering is another option here. We can filter the data based on whatever variables we want. I think to illustrate this best, if I return my visualization of my point cloud to based on classification, we'll again see the different colors. We don't have a legend displayed here, but we can see various colors representing different types of features. If I open the next button, or if I click on the next button, this allows me to filter data in real time. Now, in previous versions of Global Mapper, in order to perform this process, you would have had to filter during the input process. Now we can filter right here based on either the classification or based on return type. And this will be applied in real time. So it's a brand new function and very, very useful. You can bring in your entire LiDAR file, look at the metadata to see what the breakdown of that file is and say, hey, I only want the ground points plus perhaps some other points, and you can perform that filtering process right here using the filtering tool. Next button is extremely useful. The Apply Color button allows you to assign an RGB value from some underlying imagery to a LiDAR point cloud. So you can see right here, I've turned on my base imagery. This is some high-resolution aerial imagery, and I'm rendering my point cloud right on top of that. If I click on this button, basically what it's doing, and this is a fairly large file, it's about 7 million points, but you can see it's going through fairly quickly. It will assign the color value from the underlying imagery to each point based on the pixel RGB at that point. And to visualize that, we can change our visualization to our RGB or elevation. If there's no RGB, it will represent represent each point based on its elevation. But in our case, it represents it based on that color value. Now, it looks like I've turned on the imagery again, but this is actually a LiDAR point cloud now that is colored with that imagery. And if I view it in 3D, you'll see what that looks like. When we go a little closer, you'll start to see the points breaking up slightly. But you'll see this is now a point cloud with RGB values associated. This is extremely useful for modeling, as you can see the terrain, maintaining the visual characteristics of what's being represented. And it is a visualization option right here in the toolbar. We can drop down that option. So those are just a few of the LiDAR enhancements that are available using this LiDAR toolbar. Extremely useful addition to the software. A couple of other things to point out. We have added a new component in the configuration dialog box. If I open the configuration window, you will now see a new LiDAR tab here. This performs much of the same functionality that we saw in the filtering tool, but we now can configure within the configuration dialog box these LiDAR settings. So that's a new function that's available within the software. Let me bring it back to elevation again. We'll just render based on elevation. Now, obviously, if you're working with LiDAR data, one of the main reasons you'll be interested in working with this data is to generate a terrain surface, to generate an elevation model. And in previous versions of Global Mapper, you do that through a process called triangulation. It generates a triangulated model and generates an elevation surface from that, a gridded elevation surface. And you can still perform that function. You can still generate that elevation surface. That's performed in the analysis menu right here at the top, generate a grid from 3D vector data. Our 3D vector data in this case is our LiDAR point cloud. We've added a couple of additional options here in how this data would be gridded. The triangulation process is what was available in the previous versions. We can now use a binning process. Binning is essentially an averaging tool that averages based on the extent that you apply to the a multiple of the point spacing. I've got a value of 5 in here, which basically extends the point spacing by a multiple of 5 and creates an arbitrary bucket, if you like, and averages or creates the minimum or creates the maximum within those areas. Now, I had in my notes here to do a comparison between the tinning process and the binning process. In the interest of time, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do instead is simply show you the binning process, and we'll use our average value to perform this process. Now, again, this is a data set with about 7 million points. The process of generating an elevation surface through binning is virtually instantaneous. That's it. It's done. If I'd use the triangulation process, we'd still be looking at that status bar. So it does significantly improve the ability to generate a terrain surface. And to see what that looks like, you can see the, I had that multiple of 5, so it's create a much larger area, but the speed is incredible. It really performs that terrain generation process very, very quickly. Okay, the next one is really interesting, the next new LiDAR function. Let's go ahead and we'll turn that off and we'll turn on our point cloud once again. We're just simply looking at our raw LiDAR point cloud now. And I'm going to change the visualization to classification so you can see some of these features. We have enabled the ability to generate a profile view using LiDAR data. Now, profiling is not a new tool within Global Mapper. It's been available for quite some time, but the ability to generate a profile based on LiDAR is a new function. So I'm going to click the profile button in the toolbar, and I'm just simply going to draw an arbitrary line. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that line actually has, well, it's got a central line, that yellow line, as it would if I was doing a profile on a terrain surface, a raster terrain surface, but it's also got a width. It's got it's almost generated a buffer. The reason it has is because we're now looking at a cross-sectional view of my LiDAR data, but we're also looking at it over the width that's determined based on that buffer that I've created. And you can change that, by the way. Right here in my path setup, we can specify a corridor width. Obviously, a single line, a one-dimensional line, will not work in the context of LiDAR because it will not intersect points the same way it would drape itself over the terrain. So we can specify a width value right here. And right now, mine's set to 10 meters, but we can increase or decrease that as needed. And what we get in this display is an accumulation of points spread over that area. We can modify these points within this view as well. You'll see the classification represented. Those colors are being displayed, showing me ground points and showing me the vegetation points. But this is now that you can now edit the points within this window. I'm going to show you an application where this would be particularly useful. For this, I'm going to zoom into a building. Now, again, I'm not responsible for the data itself. We use a lot of publicly available data sets. But in this case, we have points, the green points. If I use my info tool, these points are vegetation points. They're high vegetation. We're also noticing that features that we know are not vegetation points, buildings, for instance, are also classified as vegetation points. And we know that's not correct. So I want to show you how I can use that three-dimensional perspective to update the classification for these points in a very, very simple way. So once again, I'm going to generate a profile, and this time I'm going to actually profile this building right here. And you'll see very clearly that this collection of points, including what looks like a little bit of a sloped roof here, are now isolated in this three-dimensional plane. I can very easily select all of these, and I can use the same buttons that I found in the toolbar in the two-dimensional view to change the classification. I want to make these a building, because I know they're a building. I saw that from the imagery. So 197 of my points are automatically now changed to be what I would consider to be the proper classification. And you can now see that represented right here. So in one fell swoop, I was able to change all of these to the proper classification. I think I overlapped the neighbor's front yard just a little bit. So obviously playing with the width of the profile will help to eliminate any of those overlap areas. Another way that we've changed the visualization of Global Mapper, and for this, once again, with apologies, I'm going to clear the slate. I'm not going to save those changes. I'm going to load up another workspace. And this is just a small sample of some data within the same area that we were looking at previously. You'll see from this drop-down list, and I've been using this a little bit to change how my point cloud is displayed. We've got things like elevation, intensity, visualizes the point cloud based on that intensity value. We have a new one here. We can color our LiDAR based on its height above the ground. This is a new visualization tool. And if I select this, it will first of all interpolate what it considers to be a ground level and then visualize my point cloud above that level. It gives me that ground level perspective. So that's a new visualization tool that's available in the software. A couple of other things, we're just kind of rounding off some of the LiDAR enhancements. The options for a selected LAS file or LiDAR file now include the ability to alter the elevation values. This component, this tab, is not new. Previously, it was something you could apply to a raster elevation layer, but now we can also apply it to our LAS files. We can adjust these by a scale factor. We can offset all of our point cloud by a certain value. We can also limit the extent of the elevation range. So if we want to just have those points within a certain range, we can specify this. So again, this is not a new tool, but it is new in the context of LiDAR. That's a new function. Something I can't show you, but something that is definitely worth mentioning, and you'll see confirmation for this in the enhancement or the new features of what's new document. We've really done a lot of work in increasing the efficiency of working with these point clouds. Faster drawing, more options for filtering, for cleaning up the data. So working with LiDAR data is obviously a major functional requirement in terms of the development of Global Mapper. And as you can see, we've added a lot of new tools, a lot of new visualization capabilities. We've also done a lot under the hood as well. So we are going to take a short break from the presentation now. I'm going to give my voice a little bit of a rest. We're going to conduct a poll. We're going to ask you, and we spend every month we spend a little bit of time talking to our customers, but sometimes we don't get a good feel of who's actually out there. So we're going to conduct a poll. We're going to ask a question. We're going to ask a question about what version of the software that you're using. So let's go ahead and launch that poll. And bear with me for just 1 second while I activate the poll, and you will eventually see the poll appearing on your screen. And basically asking you what version of Global Mapper you're using. Version 15, 14, or 13. Some of you may still be using an older version. And we hope there's a few of you are spending time with us today who do not currently use Global Mapper. So I'll give you a few minutes to answer the poll question.
Looks like we have quite a few 14 users. Maybe just a few more seconds and we'll close out the poll.
Okay, thanks. And by the way, the reason we do this is not just to snoop on who's paying attention. This really does help us to design the webinars and make them relevant. We want to make sure we're targeting the right audience and we're delivering the right message for those who have registered for our webinars. So your participation is greatly appreciated. So thank you. I'm going to close the poll now, and we'll go ahead and share those results. So you should be able to see the results of the poll. As you can see, about a quarter of you have upgraded already. That's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. Hopefully you're able to explore some of the new features and functions. The majority of you are still on version 14, and a few of you are on some older versions. I really do encourage you to take a look at what's been added in the last few releases of Global Mapper. Certainly you'll see there's some valuable new functions. And a special welcome to the 13% of you who are currently not using Global Mapper. Hopefully we'll give you enough of a reason at least to try it. Download a trial copy, register it free for a couple of weeks, and see if it works for you. So once again, thank you very much for following up or filling in the poll there. Okay, to this point we've...
Should we continue?
Sure, let's do that, Heather, sorry. We've looked at LiDAR to this point, the LiDAR module and some of the new LiDAR tools that are available in there. Let's change our focus slightly. Obviously, LiDAR is not the only thing that Global Mapper is used for, so I'm going to wipe my map clean here. We're going to take a look at a brand new tool under the Analysis menu. And this does not require a special license. This is going to be available to everyone, but you'll see a new option in here called Raster Calculator. This allows you to apply a calculation or apply a formula to image layers. Now, to make this a little easier for me, I've actually pre-configured some data, and I have to thank one of my colleagues, Cassie, for putting this demo together for us. We have some imagery here, some multi-band imagery. Specifically, we have a red band and we have a near-infrared band. Now, with this loaded imagery, and I believe this was downloaded directly from the USGS, so this is publicly available at least within the US. We can conduct an analysis. We can perform various analysis, the most common of which is what's referred to as NDVI, Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. This is essentially a process whereby you can gauge the relative greenness of an area by doing an analysis, performing a calculation based on
David, I gotta interrupt you for a minute. Everybody can still see the poll. They can't see.
I apologize for that. I thought I hid the poll. Try that. I'm sorry, folks. Now you can see what my screen is showing. So all you missed is I loaded up a file with some imagery. There's a few bands of imagery in here. My apologies. We have a red band and a near-infrared band covering the same area. I'm going to use my image swipe tool, and I'm going to pull one back so we can see what's underneath. Now, our calculation is going to be performed on these two layers, one being an isolated red band and one being that isolated near-infrared band. And as I mentioned, we're going to calculate the normalized difference in vegetation index, essentially the greenness. This is a really useful tool for determining the vegetation parameters of a particular area. And unfortunately, you didn't see this, so I'll show it to you now. The Analysis menu is where we access that function. So as you can see under the Analysis menu, we have a raster calculator. Now, I have preloaded my data, so we can go ahead and show you this process. Because I've only got two of these layers active, that's all that it's prompting me for. You will notice I've got a couple of different time frames. I've got September data and I've got June data. I'm going to deal with the September data in this scenario, and we'll just simply click OK. Now, this raster calculation dialog box allows us to specify the calculation parameters. There are a number of predefined formulas. NDVI is one I've mentioned, the NDWI, which is a water index. There are variations on NDVI based on the order of the color bands as well. We're just going to use the standard NDVI calculation process. You can also, by the way, customize your own formula. You can generate your own raster formula and add that and apply that to your imagery. So all I need to do at this stage is simply add this band. Now, as a result of this process, kind of jumping ahead, we're going to be generating a new layer. We can define that new layer right here. I'm just going to leave the default name as it is at the top of my screen. But you can see the formula that's going to be applied to the source imagery to come up with the NDVI, this index of greenness, if you like. Band 4, which is my near-infrared band, minus my red, which is divided by band 4, plus my red. Now the results of this process are going to be a numeric value associated with every pixel that is going to be between 1 and -1. That's the way this formula has been established. So the greater the value, the closer to positive 1, the more green is. And we'll see that result at the end of this process. So with that calculator applied, I'm simply going to click the OK button. And I'm going to write out my data. For my first band, I'm going to limit that to my red. We're not worried about our bands 2 and 3. For our fourth band, we're going to limit that to our near infrared. And we'll click OK. And you will see, when this is complete, we have a new layer. And you'll also see it has been assigned a color value. This is technically like an elevation layer. And you'll notice my elevation legend along the side of my screen indicating the values. And my values go from about -3 to about +6. The values themselves do not represent elevation. So again, with thanks to my colleague Cassie, we've actually developed a shader pattern. You can develop your own custom shaders, and this one reflects more realistically what we're seeing in this image. And you'll see that now represented, going from my zeros in a positive direction. My greenness is represented by green, and the other direction, the saturation, the water, is represented by the blue. And you can see quite clearly here the green areas derived from that calculation. So that's a brand new function within Global Mapper, raster calculation. It does generate technically what looks like an elevation layer, behaves like an elevation layer, but it's actually representing a different value. Now, one of the things that's not new in the Global Mapper, but one of the things I want to show you, because this is an elevation layer, it will automatically insert a value, an elevation value. You can turn that off. I simply right-clicked on my elevation legend. The units of measure don't mean anything in this case, so we can turn those off. So our meters do not display. You can also put a heading on this legend. So we can put a title, and that title might say NDVI. I'm not going to do it right now, but you can customize that legend to be more appropriate for the data that it's being represented. So the raster calculation tool, based on multiband imagery, generates a new layer and lets you represent it with whatever colors that you decide, whether it be standard colors pre-configured in the software or some new colors that you have added. Okay, that's another brand new function in the software. Let me unload this once again. And I'm going to show you a personal favorite of mine. This is a new tool that was added that allows me to access data from a remote location. Now, what I'm loading up, what I've loaded on the screen, is simply a shapefile. This is a shapefile you may, those of you in the New England area may recognize it. It's broadly speaking the outline of the state of Massachusetts. This is an indexing layer that I simply downloaded from the Massachusetts Office of GIS. And if I use my info tool and I click on one of these tiles, you'll notice that it has a lot of information pertaining to a image that would be available. This is essentially an indexing file that shows me the tiling process for their aerial imagery. And this is the sheet number. Now, what I did with this file is I generated a formula using the formula tool, which you can access from the Overlay Control Center, to generate a URL. I pasted in the URL and added this number. So basically, this URL at the bottom of my window represents the image tile that would cover the selected area. Okay, in Global Mapper 15, we have introduced a new way to automatically access data using a method just such as this. Now, I'm depending on the fact that the folks down in MassGIS are not rebooting their server right now, because I want to try this and see if it works. I'm going to right-click after selecting one of these tiles with my digitizer. I'm going to go all the way to my attribute style functions, and I'm going to load local or web files from an attribute within that feature. This is the new tool. Now, this could obviously be something that was stored locally, stored on the network, or in my case, it's going to come down over the web. So we'll see if it works. I choose the attribute that contains that URL, and I named it URL, and I'll click OK. I save the file somewhere. I'm just going to save it in a directory called temp, and we'll just let it go. Now it's working. We know it's out there trying to communicate with the server. It's putting my request in for my data. You can see Global Mapper is thinking about it. Eventually what will happen is it will confirm that the data has been downloaded if, again, the server is working today. You always are at the whim and mercy of the IT managers of some of these remote locations. But if and when this actually works, you will see a confirmation that the imagery is being downloaded, and then you will be given an opportunity to load that automatically. So you can see it's downloading my file. I think it's about a 10 megabyte file in this case, so it shouldn't take too long. And when it completes, again, in an automated way, it's going to ask me if I want to load this onto the map, slowly making its way up here. And when it is complete, if I talk slowly, it'll catch up with me. It will allow me to automatically load it to my screen. There we go. Would you like the selected file, to load the selected file? And I say yes. And there we go. So I was immediately able to go out to the Massachusetts Office of GIS in real time, capture the image tile that covers this area. I think it's a Mr. Sid file that was downloaded in zip format. It loaded it right up for me automatically. Now, granted, in order for me to do that, I needed to have access to that URL within the index file, but it really wasn't difficult to do that using the calculation tool. And that ability to access those remote files, whether they be on a network, as I said, or something that's out on the web, is a new function within the latest version of the software. Okay, one of the bullets in my agenda mentioned the integration, if you like, or the inclusion of some of the tools from Blue Marble's Geographic Calculator tool into Global Mapper. And that specifically requires a license for Global Energy Mapper. So if you're a Global Energy Mapper customer, you might want to take a look at this, or if you're thinking about Global Energy Mapper, this is a tool that you can access. I should also mention that it does require a license, an active license of the Geographic Calculator. But basically what this allows you to do in the configuration dialog box, it allows you to change how you manage your projection information. In Global Mapper by itself, you can change projections. We have a number of pre-configured projections. We can do a little bit of customization work in here, but with the Blue Marble Geographic Calculator application, there's a very, very extensive data source of information that can be accessed. And this tool I'm going to show you allows you to access that. The way that we activate that is through a checkbox in my General tab. I'm simply going to check that on. It needs to restart, which I will say that's fine. Go ahead and restart. Global Mapper will start back up again. And now, when I open up the configuration dialog box, we'll go ahead and load up some data so we can actually see how this works. We'll just load up our LiDAR sample once again. Let's color it by our elevation. And then we'll change our shader pattern back to our Atlas shader. So here we have just a small sample of some data. If I need to reproject this, I can simply go to the configuration dialog box, and you'll notice now it says GeoCalc projection. As opposed to the standard projection parameters, we now have access, as I said, to an extensive data source of projection information. So those of you who use Geographic Calculator will be familiar with this dialog box. Now, I'm not going to go any further with this analogy or this scenario today. Next month we're going to be looking at this component in much more detail. So if you're interested in finding out more, please join us again next month. But this is a brand new function that's available. And again, it's a function within Global Energy Mapper, and it does require you or your company to have an active license for for Geographic Calculator in order to access the data source information such as you're seeing here. One of my bullets was there's been a number of digitizer enhancements. Let me show you a few of the highlights, a few of the more interesting ones. I'm just going to activate the digitizer tool, and I'm going to scribble for a while. Obviously, we're not doing anything in any real sort of way. One of my favorite tools for digitizing in Global Mapper is the Kogo tool. This is not a new function. This has been around for many generations. But Kogo, for those of you who don't know, offers the ability to generate line features based on their known dimensions. You define these based on a distance and a bearing. And I'm going to draw a very quick 100-kilometer line on a bearing of 90 degrees. And you'll see that will, based on where I've originally clicked on the map, it will draw me a line segment. And I can continue that to very accurately draw line segments. Now, the new function that has been added, as you'll notice here, we can actually create numbered points. This allows me to tag a point along each line segment. So when we're done here, not only does it create a line feature, but it also creates points, and you'll see those points right here. I, for some reason, had started the point count at 5. So you can actually automatically generate points, and you may not even need the line in this case. you may just want to generate those point features, and you can see after deleting the line, those points are retained. So you can use Kogu then to assign point locations, just a variation on that process. Another new enhancement relates to using range wings. Range wings are, again, not a new function in the software, but this tool allows you to generate radiating rings, radiating out from a defined location, whether that be somewhere you click on the map, or you can specify the coordinates. Well, one of the changes here is we've allowed you to now specify a style. Previously, it was a standardized black line, black outline that was represented, but you can specify that now. We had some requests to allow more flexibility in how those range wings are generated. But what I find really interesting now is we've actually generated a tool to create radial lines integrated into my range wings. Let's go ahead and we'll choose radial 4 range wings, a distance of about 10 kilometers. I'm just looking at my scale to make sure this will fit. And I want to generate radiating lines every 20 degrees. And again, you can specify the style of those. Now, when I click OK with this, it creates a very interesting result. You'll see not only do I have my range wings, my concentric rings, but now it's divided it up into these line features. These line features have been added based on the angle that I specified. So it gives a good tool for doing sampling or for doing some sort of visual representation within the context of a circular or a series of radiating circles. Again, a new tool. We'll just wipe the slate clean, and I'm going to show you a couple more digitizer tools here. This one I find very useful as well. I'm going to use my area tool. And obviously I'm not doing anything that would represent anything real in the real world. I'm just going to draw an arbitrary area. And in that arbitrary area, I'm going to draw a couple of arbitrary lines. Obviously not a great deal of care and attention taken here, but we have 2 line segments, two line features that dissect in their own way an area feature. So I have my area, and I have my 2 lines. Now I want to actually select all 3, because what I can do now is I can use these line segments, these manually drawn lines in this case, but they could be derived from any source. I'm going to use these to essentially split that area feature. And this is a new function in the crop combine split function submenu, where I can split my selected area based on these lines. Let's go ahead and split area to selected lines, as you can see right here. So we go ahead and select that option, and go ahead and deselect what was selected. Now I have 4 area segments. So I can use my line tool as a slice, if you like, to slice through an area if I want to dissect an area feature either one time, or as you can see with multiple line segments, I can do that very clearly, very quickly. Now we're almost out of time. I want to make sure we leave enough time at the end to answer any questions you have been asking, but there's one more tool I want to show you. And for this, actually, I want to back out of Global Mapper, and I'm going to show you another file. We've added a number of buffering options. I'm going to open a number of scripting options. I'm going to open up a script file with an example of a script. For those of you who have not worked with scripting or not familiar with scripting in Global Mapper, a couple of months ago, we did a webinar on scripting. So it is a worthwhile thing to view if you're interested in automating some of the data processing. One of the features that was missing from scripting for a long time was buffering. You could not generate a buffer from a script, and I know we had a lot of people asking for that. Well, that now has been added. Since we released version 15, you can now generate a buffer. And I have generated a script. I've created a very simple script with a number of sample points. This is just a series of points randomly arrayed. And now we can, using the edit vector command within our script, the parameters are my buffer distance. So we're essentially going to generate buffers of 200 meters around these points, and we're going to combine them. So our overlapping buffers will be combined. I'm going to export the results of that to a shapefile called buffer areas, and just to verify the file does not exist right now. Eventually it will appear in this folder when we run the script. And it's going to be a shapefile, they're going to be areas, and we'll generate a projection file. So this, again, for those of you who have not used scripting, this is just an example of an automated workflow where I'm going to take one file, which is points, import it, generate buffers, combine the buffers, and then export the result. So how do I run the script? Again, those of you who were at the webinar before will know that we can simply double-click on this file. This is a simple little ASCII file. It's a text file generated from a text file, but with a specific suffix, a global mapper script, GMS. All I need to do is double-click on the file. And hopefully it will not take long. If I open up my buffer areas folder, eventually, if everything goes according to plan, it will refresh. Importing and buffering should not take long. Well, maybe it won't work, but eventually, hopefully, the buffer areas will be generated. Well, maybe it's not going to work for me today, but that buffering process is a new component, a new feature of the scripting process, allowing you to generate buffers by pointing to an existing file in this case. And I'm still waiting to see if it will refresh for me. It's not going to cooperate with me today, so with apologies for that. That about wraps up what I would consider to be the highlights of Global Mapper 15. As I said before, as I said at the start, there are a number of other enhancements. You can refer to the document that's installed with the software to see what those enhancements are. But the LiDAR module, the module and extension capability, some of the digitizer tools, all of these new functions are now available to you within Global Mapper 15. I've been noticing a few questions coming in from some of the attendees, Heather. Are any of those questions you want to share?
Yeah, earlier we had a couple questions about 3D PDF export functionality. Mm-hmm. We had a question whether or not you need special software to view those files. To
view the files. Well, obviously Global Mapper can be used to generate the files, as we demonstrated. One of the export options is, yeah, exporting a 3D PDF. Not active right now because I don't have any 3D data or any data loaded. But as far as if you want to send one of these files to someone, no, there's really no special software. They would need to have a version of Acrobat Reader, which really empowers Acrobat Reader to be more than just a document viewer, but it really becomes a GIS viewer. You saw the way I was able to manipulate. I think I still have the file open. Yeah, you can see the way I can manipulate the perspective of this 3D file, and this is just standard Acrobat Reader. There was nothing special here, so that is just this standard version of Adobe Acrobat Reader that's being used. So, good question, yeah.
We also had questions related to that about security and if you could save your PDF file with security settings, and the answer to that is yes.
Okay, so there are settings available as well, so yeah, thank you for that one.
And then it looks like we had a question about the LiDAR module. Mm-hmm. Do you need to have a license for the LiDAR module to import a loss file?
To import a LAS file? No, actually, no, that you don't. I think that's probably worth clarifying. As you saw in the first half of my presentation, we have done a lot of work with the LiDAR processing, and you'll see the LiDAR toolbar now displayed on my screen here. That does not mean to say that if you don't have the LiDAR toolbar, you cannot work with LAS files. You can. You can still import LAS. You can still generate a TIN-based elevation grid. So you still have that ability. We would certainly encourage you, if you're interested in working with LiDAR data, to take a look at this new component, because it significantly enhances your experience. Even the binning process I showed you, it's virtually instantaneous, generating a surface model from a large LiDAR point cloud, whereas with the triangulation method, it will work, but it is a little bit slower to generate your data. So the answer to the question is no. You do not need to upgrade to the LiDAR toolbar just simply to view a LAS file. That's another good question.
I also wanted to clarify, I saw that we had some questions in about what features come with the base model versus the LiDAR module, and any features that we have in the base model of 14 for processing LiDAR are still available in 15 without having to upgrade to the LiDAR module.
Again, apologies, maybe I didn't make that clear. In my excitement to share the functionality of the new module, I should have clarified. We don't take functionality away. We're not in the business of removing tools. So you'll still get the same functionality in version 15, working with LiDAR data that you got in 14. But as we have said, yes, the new module will significantly enhance your experience in that regard. So.
And I think we're almost out of time, but one last question about buffering. We have a question about, has the online scripting reference been updated to increase buffering?
I believe it does. Yeah, I think if you look at the online reference, which is accessible from the Blue Marble website, from the support menu on the Blue Marble website, it is current with all of the recently added commands that are available in scripting, including buffering. I think I did actually notice that buffering is in there, so you can look at that option in the new buffering tab. So, or in the knowledge. I believe it's under the knowledge base in our support menu.
All right, so I think that's all we have time for questions right now.
Okay, well, thanks for your help with that, Heather. It's one thing when I do a webinar, very often I don't get to directly interact with the folks who are attending, and I appreciate Heather's passing on some of those questions. Hopefully, we've got enough information that will encourage you to upgrade or to at least take a look at the latest version of the software. By way of wrapping up, I promised at the start of the presentation that I would share some information with you, and as you can see on the screen in front, we've got a number of email addresses, a number of web addresses that you can visit to find out more information. The Blue Marble Geo website obviously is an important one where this is where you can go to find out about our company, about the products, and go to the knowledge base as I referred to before. The Global Mapper Forum, an excellent resource for interacting with other users. We see that as a peer-to-peer learning process where you can learn how other people are actually using the software in the context of their day-to-day workflow. A couple of email addresses in here for support. We mentioned at the start if you have ongoing questions about the software, or if you're viewing the recording of this, obviously real-time questions are not available in the recorded version, but feel free to send us an email at any time. If there's something that we need to clarify, questions you have, we're always there and available to answer questions through our GeoHelp email address. Ordering, if your company would like to get some more information about the pricing or upgrading from an older version. I noticed some of you sitting on older versions, even older than version 13. You're the people who need to be contacting our sales folks, because you're really missing out on a lot of really advanced functionality in some of those older versions. But GM orders, the folks are sitting downstairs today ready to answer any questions you might have. And Heather noted a couple of training opportunities. We're continually on the road. I'm actually going to be in the great state of Texas next week doing a training class. There are a number of additional training classes coming up. If you are interested in training in your area, whether it be requesting perhaps a public class, we can only respond where there's a demand. And if there's enough people in a certain area that are interested in training, we'll certainly look at that. Or if your company who's invested in the software would like to get some formal training, we can do that as well. So training opportunities, feel free to email our training line. And a couple of email addresses to download the software. You can see the URL right here. You can navigate through our website, or you can go to get some more information about our upcoming user conference. Very exciting next week. And once again, thank you everyone, and Heather, thank you very much for your help today. We look forward to speaking with you again next month and on the next Global Mapper webinar.
Yes, thank you, David. Thank you, everyone.